Let's start. So it's an easy and a hard introduction, being honest, because I've never talked to a legend like Karl in person, but it's going to be the first experience of this kind. And I think it won't be an exaggeration to say that the fact that we are here today is an indirect result of what Karl did. It was just not a single did, a set of them. But anyway, I think, Karl, you can observe the results of what you have been doing over years. This community was set up by inspired people, and you were one of those who had been inspiring those people. So yeah, that's interesting, and I hope it's in a way pleasant.
Of course, it's wonderful to hear, and I really appreciate the kind comments. My wife doesn't seem to think I'm a legend at all, so it's not that big a deal. But I appreciate your kind comments, and I'm happy to be with you today.
Excellent. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Karl Wiegers on behalf of this community. Karl is everyone knows who is Karl, but let me repeat that. He is a principal consultant with Process Impact, which is a software development consulting and education company in Portland, Oregon. He also has a PhD in organic chemistry, and his interests include requirements engineering, project management, software quality, and software process improvement. And as you might have noticed, he is the author of many books, 13 being precise and uncountable articles. Many of these articles can be found on his Medium account, karlwiegers.medium.com. We'll drop this link to our media channels after the event, and I think you might want to visit it unless you are already consuming this source. So today's conversation is going to be in the context of the recent book by Karl, Software Development Pearls, 50 Years of Software Experience. I tried to demonstrate it on camera to make you envious, but how Zoom cuts the background makes it really hard. But I think Karl has it.
No background.
It looks better. Yeah, I should have made cleanup in my room to be able to turn background off. So yeah, Karl, is there probably anything you might want to tell the audience before we proceed with my questions about the book?
I don't know. That was very thorough. It's early here. You folks have had a long day, so thank you for sticking for this part of the session. I guess you've covered things well enough, and we'll probably have a good enough conversation here. There's nothing really I need to add. I do very much appreciate the kind comments that so many of my Belarusian friends have offered over the years. It's, as an author, I've been writing books for about 25 years or so. It's, you write books, you put them out into the world, you never know what's going to happen. You teach a class, and I've taught hundreds and hundreds of classes, and people come to the class or the conference presentation or these kinds of things, and they hang around for a while, and they seem to be interested, and then they go away, and you don't know what happens. That's one of the interesting things about being a consultant, is I very rarely get to find out what happens afterwards, after I teach the class and go home. Did it make a difference? Did people do anything better? Did they have a good time? So it's always great when I do get a chance to find out that the work I've done has been helpful for people, because that's why you do it. So I'm always happy to hear that.
Yeah, thanks. That was, I think, a valuable second portion of the introduction. So let's proceed, actually. And Karl, my first question is kind of obvious. So can you tell us, why did you write this book at all?
Well, I hadn't planned to write this book, but I also hadn't planned to be stuck at home for a couple of years with nothing to do because of COVID. And so I had been collecting over my life these little ideas, these little experiences, and I'm pretty good at observing a situation and trying to draw lessons from that we can then maybe turn into broader lessons that apply to many situations and share with other people. I found that experience is a great way to learn, but it's also slow and painful. And I learned long ago, you don't have time to make every mistake that every software developer before you has already made. And since I've learned some useful things over my long career, often from mistakes I made and said, I should have done something different, but also from what I've seen at consulting clients, what I've heard from students in the classes that I've taught. And I pulled a lot of these lessons together in software development pearls. And my goal is for readers not to have to climb all the same painful learning curves that I did. Let's look over each other's shoulders and learn as much as we can instead of doing it all ourselves every time and then wondering why it's taking so long and so unpleasant.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, that's been comprehensive. And here I like to share a quote by one of the founders of this community, Yuri Videnin, with whom you had an interview 12 years ago in 2010. Basically, it's the year when this community was founded. And he said, here, I would like to thank you personally for this book, Software Requirements, because it's changed my professional life. End of the quote. So, Karl, I should say here, it's true not just for Yuri and for me, and I'm convinced for many others here, it has also had a huge impact on us. So thank you again for this. And with that in mind, could you please highlight the key differences between these two books, Software Requirements that I think we here are well acquainted with, and Pearls?
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks to Yuri for those kind comments. As I said, it's always great to learn that people find my work helpful. One of the big differences is that Pearls is not specifically written for business analysts or requirements analysts. I have 60 lessons in 6 categories in Pearls, and the largest group of lessons, 16 of them, are on requirements because, as of course you know, I've done a lot of stuff with the requirements for many years. I first got interested in improving how my project teams handled requirements. 1985, I think, is when I said, we have to do a better job. Most of you weren't born in 1985, I suspect, but believe it or not, people wrote software before the year 2000, before the Agile Manifesto. People actually wrote software, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so much. So I've got a lot of pearls in the book on requirements. But really, the book is intended for people who perform any function on a software team. I have 6 categories of lessons: requirements, design, project management, culture and teamwork, which isn't technical, but it's pretty important, quality, and software process improvement. And many of the pearls I found is interesting. I've noticed that a lot of the lessons apply to things I encounter in daily life or things other people encounter. It's not just for technical people, although I can't imagine that a non-software person would probably read it, but they could get something out of it if they did, and they'd certainly understand it. So in the Software Requirements book, I tried to cover a really broad range of topics and practices on requirements development and requirements management. The 3rd edition of the book, which is the one probably most of you are familiar with, the one with that orange and gray cover. Yeah. That was published in 2013. And one of the smartest professional things I did was ask Joy Beatty to be my co-author on that book. And she contributed a huge amount of value, and she's a very dear friend now as well. So we tried to cover a bunch of special topics too, okay, on requirements for this kind of project or that kind of project. So I tried to share in Pearls, not such a comprehensive coverage of any single topic, but a lot of lessons, a lot of things that I and many other people have learned, along with practices that people can perform that are related to those lessons. I'm not a theorist. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a methodologist. I try to be very practical. And so I've done that same kind of flavor in Pearls, but I'm not trying to cover a whole topic area in great detail.
Yeah, got it. Thanks. You know, as I have been reading it for a few weeks already, I think the feeling that I have throughout this process is that I'm kind of digesting concentrated practical wisdom, if you will. Like if a friend tells me like what traps to avoid, like, and honestly, I wish I had read something like this, like, let's say 5 years ago or even earlier. It would have prevented quite some painful episodes. And Karl, since it's a collection of lessons, tell me, please, what's the most important lesson about software development and business analysis that you've learned from your experience?
Well, that's a good question. I've thought about that because there are a lot of lessons, and some I think are more significant than others. And what you said, Alex, is exactly what I was hoping a reader would get out of it, is to say, oh, I'm glad I hear that now, because I was going to do this and now I'm going to do something different because I see that might not work very well, or here's a better idea. But I think the most important lesson is what I call lesson number 4, which is this: a usage-centric approach to requirements will meet customer needs better than a feature-centric approach. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. A lot of times people focus on product features. And when I say product, I don't care what kind of thing you're building, whether it's an information system or a website or a embedded systems product. So when I say product or system, I'm just referring to whatever your output is. But people often focus on features. You know, what can they put in their bullet list of features, or what should we put on our website? And I think that's the wrong approach. And I think that this is a problem with the way some people use the user story approach, is to focus on functionality, focus on features. I prefer to understand the tasks that users need to accomplish with the system as the starting point for business analysis, rather than focusing on the features the solution should have. And so that helps us in a couple of ways. For one thing, sometimes people implement software that's got all the features they thought were interesting or cool, and two things happen. Maybe people can't quite do all their jobs because we missed something, because we weren't thinking about the job, we were thinking about the functionality. And the second thing that happens, has this ever happened to you? You implement software with functionality that people said they needed, but no one ever uses it?
I prefer not to answer how often this has happened, but it has.
Yeah, I think we've all had that experience. I remember once that there was a system I was working on when I worked at Kodak, a film company that used to be very large and now is extremely small. That was not my fault, okay? But when some people came to us and said, could you add this functionality to the system you've built? So we did, and no one ever used it. And we worked just as hard on that as we did on the stuff that people do use. So that's annoying. But if you focus on usage rather than on features, it helps you avoid implementing that functionality that maybe seemed like a good idea, but doesn't really relate to helping people do their job. So I think use cases are a good way to keep the requirements elicitation focused on usage. And from an understanding of that usage, the BA can then say, all right, let me figure out what functionality we have to implement in the solution so people can do all those things. So to me, that's the most important message here, is focus on usage and users rather than on the product.
So
have you seen that at all? Anything like any of that kind of experience relate to you?
It's definitely applicable to what I've been doing in I think all of my jobs, since it's outsourcing story. So you have a lot of cases where someone comes to you with a solution and says, build this. And there you start this objective analysis, if you're lucky, and if you're able to. So it's, I think folks here on the call, if you can just show it, if it resonates with you through reactions or let's say pluses, we'll see the scale, how frequently this happens. But I'm confident it does happen frequently to us here.
I went to, I've been a consultant for quite a few years. And so I've talked to many people at many companies. And I think the biggest complaint that business analysts have shared with me is our customers don't give us requirements, they give us solutions. Yeah. And you have to make this transformation, convert it in the mind of the customer, show the real problem, understand the real problem first. So it's, I think this is our job, actually. Exactly. That's exactly your job, is to kind of detect when are you hearing a solution? When are you hearing something that's a possible constraint on a solution that has to be implemented a certain way? And then the question to ask is why? Why do we have to do it that way? And if you ask that a few times, you can maybe get to the point where you understand what's the real underlying need that led someone to come up with that solution idea. And maybe it's a good solution idea, but maybe it's not. So let's understand the usage, and then I think we can avoid some of those kinds of problems.
Yeah, I think this is extremely topical. So thanks for sharing these insights, Karl. And I have also a question about the let's say sections of the pearls. So as you mentioned, it covers more areas besides business analysis, like project management, process improvement, and others. And how important do you think it is for a business analyst to train themselves to gain skills in these surrounding areas to be successful?
I think a BA, excuse me, maybe doesn't need to be skilled in all of those other areas that are part of software development. You don't have to be a skilled coder, for example, but you certainly need an understanding and appreciation of those areas. And this is because, as of course you all know, BA work bridges a lot of the other pieces of work that are going on in the project. So a BA has to be able to communicate effectively with all the other project stakeholders, whether they're on the customer side or the technical side, which means you need to understand their language, the major activities they're involved with, their mindsets, their concerns. What are their hot buttons? I don't know if you know the term hot button, but that's like when you press a hot button, you hit that topic and it annoys somebody. It gets a quick reaction from people. That's called a hot button. Okay, so we need to know, what are the things that you're concerned about? So as an example, the outputs that a BA produces, they feed into design, of course, they feed into testing. So you have to produce deliverables that meet the needs of designers and testers. That means we need to understand the way they work, how they need to receive information, what level of detail they need, that sort of thing. So it doesn't mean you need to be able to create good designs or tests yourselves. You don't need to be project managers yourselves, but the BA helps fit all those pieces together. And like one topic I'm very interested in and have done a lot of work on is software quality. Well, the actions the BA takes to improve the requirements quality has a huge impact on the quality of the solutions the team can create. So I think a BA would find a lot of value in reading through the lessons in Pearls on these other areas beyond just requirements, because the BA's impact spans all of these kinds of domains.
Yeah, exactly. Regarding quality, I saw somewhere a sentence that it's way cheaper to fix a house like before it's constructed while it's still in design phase.
I can give you a good example of that, actually. I had a friend who built a house many years ago. And they had all the plans and everything. He monitored what was going on as they were building the house, and everything seemed okay. But then when they moved into the house, he noticed that when I hang a coat hanger in this one closet at the end of the house, the closet is too shallow. And it turned out when they investigated, they found that the house was built 1 foot shorter than the plans said that the house should be built. That's hard to fix. So they lived with the narrow closet, the shallow closet. But wouldn't it have been better if we'd had quality checks all along the way and measure things repeatedly and so forth, rather than getting to the end and hoping it all came out right? He was not very happy.
Yeah, I imagine. Well, being honest, I cannot imagine this, but it shouldn't have been a lot of fun, I guess.
No, it wasn't. Most people don't enjoy building houses.
Yeah. Okay. And we already mentioned the topic of COVID and its impact on our lives. It has also made an impact on IT. Like the IT world has shifted to being remote to a large extent, if not most extent. Like those nice in-house teams, pizza teams, one pizza teams, they are now they are not still extincting, but I think they are way less frequent. So in the context of the lessons that Pearls list, do you see anything that is particularly topical in the context of all this remote and distributed stuff?
Yes, it's had a big impact. And just the fact that I can see lots of people with wires coming out of their ears in the videos here, because this is how we're working now a lot of times when we collaborate with other people. I have this chapter about culture and teamwork that it does have some lessons that are relevant to distributed teams. For example, one lesson says knowledge is not zero sum. And what that means is that if I have a piece of knowledge and if I give it to you, I still have it. Have you ever known somebody who seems to protect their knowledge? You go to them with a question and they only give you part of the answer because they don't want you to be as smart as they are. They want to protect their knowledge because that gives them job security or something. It makes it harder for us to work together. And right now, we don't have the opportunities for day-to-day interactions that we might have if we were working in the same physical space and you just, walk down the hall to ask somebody a quick question. And so I think it's more important than ever that people who are working together share their knowledge freely with each other, through various channels. I don't have much patience with people who hoard their knowledge and just try to keep it to themselves. We can all do better if we share what we know. I do talk a little bit about distributed teams in another lesson. I learned a long time ago, it said that it takes very little physical separation to inhibit communication and collaboration. I was working with a guy. We were sitting maybe 12 feet apart, 10 feet apart in our desks in our offices. I could see him through our common door. And so if I had a question, I could go ask him, or I could say, can you look at this user interface, or can you look at this, report I generated? And we could get very quick turnaround. And one day he moved to a new office on the same floor of the same building. It was a big building. And I felt my productivity drop.
COVID effect.
I just couldn't get that quick interaction. And so now we don't have that opportunity as well. We've got good collaboration tools like, Zoom. They make it easier for people to communicate and work together, but you can't really read body language as well. You can't have these quick, spontaneous interactions. And one of my reviewers for Pearl said, I click out of one virtual meeting. I go right into the next one. When do I get a bio break? She doesn't even have time to go to the bathroom in between virtual meetings. And that's a factor.
Yeah.
One other point is we're changing our culture, right? People are changing how their workplace operates, and changing culture is much harder than changing technical practices. So I think managers and leaders of all sorts have to work harder to build a quality-driven, healthy software engineering culture, so everybody is still pointing in the same direction and working together effectively and hopefully having a good time.
Yeah, that's definitely topical in today's world. And it's unclear which trend is there, but at least so far, the world remains being remote, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will never go back to work.
I won't. It's just so nice to have a cabinet at home. So once you try it, you can never
hard to go back.
Forget it. Yeah. Okay, cool. And Karl, I have a question about a specific lesson from the book. Okay. It has a name: icebergs are always larger than they first appear. So can you please tell us about the most impressive iceberg you've dealt with?
Yeah, the idea of icebergs, that lesson, icebergs are always larger than they first appear. What I mean by that too is that software projects often turn out to be larger at the end than you think they're going to be at the beginning. And I suspect there has never been a case of a project that turned out to be smaller than people expected. They often grow. And I can give you a great story about that. One of my consulting clients I did a lot of work for was working on a very large project. They had dozens of people, 5-year project by their estimate. So it was a very big commercial product they were building. Now there's some literature data that people have collected about growth of projects. And one suggestion that people have found is that on a large long-term project, the requirement space can grow by between 1% and 3% per month over that time. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, 1%, 2%, but if there are a lot of months involved, it can make a big difference. So I was talking to a senior manager at this project, and I said, well, do you think it's reasonable that your requirements might grow by about 2% per month? And he said, yeah, sure, that could happen. So I said, so that means at the end of your 5-year or 60-month project, if you do the math, your project could be more than twice as big as you think it's going to be today. And he said, yeah, that's possible. So I asked him this very important question. Have you built into your project plans any contingency buffers that you could use to accommodate some of that possible growth? And his answer was, everybody all together now, no. So I'm guessing that the project was probably not done in 5 years, but that's one of those cases, like I said earlier, where I never got to find out, 5 or 10 years later what actually happened. But the point is, because projects get bigger, I mean, change happens. It's natural. It's often good, although sometimes it can be chaotic and disruptive and bad. Sometimes too much change, too much growth means we did not do a very good job of business analysis to really understand the problem. So we have to build into our plans some contingency buffers so that the first estimate that's wrong, the first new requirement that comes along, those things don't just destroy your schedule and make it impossible to meet commitments. So projects that don't have contingency buffers built in are probably going to have problems keeping up with the change and growth.
Yeah, sad but true. And again, if it's something you guys have suffered from, just let us see it, because I'm gonna post a huge plus here. So Karl, I have quite some more questions, but I also see that we have a populated list from this crowdsourcing tool. So I'm gonna ask just one last question from me, and we'll switch there. So on the one hand, in this audience, there are a lot of people who are already practicing business analysts. Some are seasoned specialists, but also a certain part of this audience is just on the way to becoming a business analyst. They are either still learning or just considering if to start learning. So is there any advice you could give them?
Yeah, I think there are some important points about business analysis that are worth keeping in mind if you're moving in that direction. First, being a BA is not, it's not primarily a computing or technical activity. It's a communication activity. So you need to be able to communicate effectively by listening, by speaking, by writing, by presenting, and so forth, with people who have different backgrounds, different interests, different pressures, different needs. Related to that, as I alluded to earlier, the BA performs an important bridging role, facilitating the communication of critical information from users and other stakeholders to developers and testers and other members of the technical team. So this bridging function means you have to have not only an understanding of the vocabulary for all of your communities that you're working with, but you also have to recognize when conflicts come up, and you're going to have to resolve those conflicts. So it's an interpersonal thing. Another point is that a BA is not simply a scribe. I hate the term gathering requirements. I don't like people to talk about gathering requirements. We're not just collecting things. You're not just writing down when people say they need and saying those are our requirements. So a good BA can add a lot of value by getting down below the surface of what customers tell them, to understand the real problem, to understand the real needs. And creativity is an important part of that. A BA has to be careful not to just impose their own understanding of what the solution should be on the users who maybe have never had this conversation before. But I think it's great to make suggestions, and you might make a suggestion, would anybody find this useful? And they might say, no, I don't think so. Or they might say, wow, you could do that? We never even thought of that. That would be wonderful. Thank you. So I think the BA can reach this balancing act and contribute a great deal of value to helping an IT project succeed.
I think it's a great recommendation. Thank you. Thank you, Karl. Let me share my screen now. Let's see what we have gathered. Let me find this control, because as you're jumping between different tools for calls, at least in my case, I always forget where the share screen button is.
Well, there's a problem, isn't it? So I wrote a book last year called The Thoughtless Design of Everyday Things, about bad design. And Zoom has some good examples of bad design. And that's one of them. You get this toolbar at the bottom. And if you don't do anything for about 3 seconds, it goes away, even though Zoom doesn't use that space at the bottom. And I find that very annoying. It adds no value to the customer, the user, to have that go away. And then they have to say, how do I bring back all these buttons? Where were they? I need to do something with them. I hate that. Read that book, The Thoughtless Design of Everyday Things, because we don't want to do those kinds of mistakes. That's the end of my commercial.
Oh, yeah. No, I stopped, I don't think I already have emotions arising from this. I'm just suffering, like as I'm switching between something from Microsoft to Zoom to something else. So yeah, that's the path. All right, so you guys should be seeing my screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me try to zoom in a bit. And we have as I had hoped, we have a self-prioritized list of questions. And Karl, as we go through them, I'm not sure how many we will be able to cover, but I'm going to just ask you to pinpoint in your mind the one you will like most. This question will get our secret prize after today's event.
There's a lot of questions to choose from here. I might need some help with that.
Yeah, let's just go upside down based on the votes, because we have the ones that the community has rated the most. So number one, I don't know if it's gonna add a lot of value if I just read it out loud. So here it's about the books you read.
All right, I have to move a panel here so I can see the whole question.
Okay.
So it's no secret that business analysts read my books. Well, what kind of books, or what books do I read? Well, I've read a lot. Somebody asked me a little while ago, where did you get all this knowledge? And, well, I'm not sure I have a whole lot of knowledge, but one of the things I've done is read a lot of software books. And some of the ones that I found very influential, there was a book by Alan Davis called, I think, 201 Principles of Software Development, a little book, which I read a long time ago. And it was a little bit similar to Pearls because it had a lot of these short messages and lessons, and not nearly as much detail as I go into in my descriptions for each lesson, but it had a lot of those little messages that have stuck in my mind that helped me make decisions and choose what actions that I wanted to take. So that was an older book, and Pearls is kind of a big, huge update and enhancement of that same idea. I've read books by other people that were very influential on me. In particular, I read about, instead of naming certain titles, I can talk about topics. I got very excited about modeling many years ago. I took a class on modeling, and that totally changed how I thought about software development. So I'm a very strong proponent of building analysis models, diagrams of various kinds. And if I hadn't been reading about those sorts of things or taking classes on them, I probably wouldn't have had that impact on me. I also read a lot of fiction also, and I read a lot of military history. Those are probably not quite as relevant, but I'm actually retired now. So yeah, I don't read a whole lot of software books anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this one is answered. Let's move to the next one. Oh, interesting. It's about traveling in time.
Back in time. What would be the most important 3 things? Well, I think the idea, actually, I can take a look here at the lessons and see which ones jump out as being most important. It's always hard to come up with something that's most important because I have 60 things to choose from here. So knowing which one's most important is a little hard. I certainly think that one of the most powerful things I learned was that focus on usage. And when I started using use cases on projects, that radically improved how I approached requirements, much better than what we had done before. So that was something I didn't know at the beginning of when I started doing software. So that was certainly a huge important thing to do. I also became very sold on the issue of peer reviews. So I'm very big on peer reviews. I wrote a book on that about 20 years ago. And I think that's a little harder for people because we're not used to asking people to tell us what we did wrong. But that's exactly what you have to do, is to say, okay, here I've created something, help me make it better. And if people learn that lesson early, I think that's going to help them a great deal. And maybe another really important point is I call beware the crap gap. Okay, I'll tell you what I mean by that. If you hold your fingers up like this, a little distance, a lot of times this is the difference between quality and crap. In other words, it doesn't take that much more work, that much more time, that much more thinking, just a little bit more. And it's like the idea, you might have heard the expression, measure twice, cut once. Same kind of idea. Let's just put a little more attention into testing, into asking, into verifying assumptions, that kind of thing. Just a little bit of quality difference makes a huge difference in quality of the product. And I guess those are things that, again, I've learned the hard way. And I think if everybody can learn those kinds of lessons early, it will save them some pain.
Yeah, fewer scars, I guess.
Fewer scars, yes, that's exactly right. Someone who was reviewing my book said, every one of these lessons has scars associated with it, but we all want fewer scars. That's exactly correct, Alex.
It can be felt, as you read them.
Yes.
Scars are a good motivator. But
they are. Pain is a great motivator for change, but let's try to do it without the pain if we can.
I totally agree. All right, thank you. And interesting, in one of our streams today, we had a speaker with a topic specifically about giving and receiving feedback. So, like, this topic has way more nuances than I could have imagined. So
it does.
So yeah.
And one of the things we have to do is when we give people feedback, we have to state it in a way that people are receptive to. If you alienate people, if you push them away just by the way you phrased some feedback, then they're not going to listen to what you have to say. And a good way to do that, I think, is when you're having a review or when you're providing feedback, don't use the word I or don't use the word you, use the word I. In other words, instead of saying, you left out this, or you got this wrong, instead say, I didn't see this, or I didn't understand this. I think that makes it easier for other people to say, oh, yeah, good point.
Yeah, that definitely works better. And in the meantime, we have a changed priority here. So the question about the weirdest requirement is kind of moving up. So I guess we can't avoid it.
The weirdest requirement I can remember, I'm sorry, but I really can't answer that because I have read thousands of requirements of the years. One of the services I've provided as a consultant is to review requirement specifications for some of my clients. So I've seen an awful lot of requirements documents, some of them with hundreds and hundreds of requirements in them. And I'm sure I saw a lot of bad requirements. A lot of things that were ambiguous or had other kinds of problems. But in terms of the weirdest requirement, nothing specific comes to mind at this particular moment. Sorry.
Okay, got it.
I'm not sure it would be very meaningful if I thought of it. I could make one up and you wouldn't know the difference, but I won't.
Okay. And another one is moving up as we talk. Again, I won't read it out. So here it is.
So the idea of the bridge between business and development. I'm not sure what's meant by meaning people lost deep meaning. Can I give a new one to share? I think there's probably two aspects to being a bridge. One is facilitating the communication. Okay, just being able to take business language, needs, and input and translate that into solution guidance that developers can work on. And so people sometimes say, well, how do I write requirements so that everybody can understand them? And I don't think there is one way that you can do that, and to write requirements both from a technical understanding viewpoint, so people have all the detail they need, and from a business understanding so that they can validate that, yes, we've captured the need correctly. So I think a lot of times you have to recognize that you need to represent knowledge in more than one way. That's a very important point of being an effective bridge, is to say, how can I best communicate this knowledge to various people? And sometimes that means having more than one representation of different levels of detail, maybe one in text with detail, maybe one in pictures for people who only need a bigger view. So I think that's a very important part of being the bridge. Another part of being the bridge is to get to another one of my pearls here, actually. I'm going to see if I can quote this for you, which is that, here we go. The overarching objective of requirements development is clear and effective communication, okay? And there are a lot of ways to do that. People sometimes say, oh, okay, well, we don't write requirement specs anymore. We write user stories. Well, sometimes that's fine. Sometimes there are better ways. And so I think to be an effective bridge, you have to understand the right way to communicate the right level of information to different communities. And that is, I think, the central point of bridging those two communities. That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. So would it be a correct way to rephrase it if we say that it should be all context driven?
Yeah, definitely. But it should be also driven to meet the needs of each audience. You know, when you write a book or teach a class, you get one shot, right? You get one chance to try to communicate, and you do it the best way you think of. But maybe that doesn't work well with certain kinds of people. Not everyone's going to read a detailed set of user stories or requirement specification, but other people need that information. So I think you have to look at the context, you have to look at the needs of the audience when you're choosing how to communicate effectively between them. That's a very important BA task.
Yeah, another great insight, I believe. Thank you very much for this. Our next question from an anonymous user that cares about the prospects for business analysis as a profession. So what do you think about this?
Well, I've learned that I generally try not to predict the future because I'm not very good at it. I think business analysis and the role of the business analyst has certainly become much more appreciated and recognized as valuable over the last, say, 20 years. Before that, we had the same people. They were called requirements analysts or simply analysts, but it's the same idea. You know, I don't know that the role would be transferred to something else, but I think the function is always going to have to exist. We're always going to have people who can work with communities who have needs and translate that information well understood and properly structured and communicate it to people who provide solutions. So the role, I don't think, will ever go away. Somebody asked me a question recently in a webinar about no-code solutions. Well, I think that's a misnomer. Somebody clearly wrote a lot of code to enable the kit that lets people build a no-code solution. But if you're trying to be on the user end of that and you're assembling components from some kit to build a dashboard or something that you think of as no code, then you are acting as the business analyst, right? You are saying, here's my needs, here's some pieces I can plug together, and your choices are limited because there's only so many pieces in the kit. But you're functioning as a business analyst then. So does this mean that everybody has BA skills? No. Everybody may be put into that role, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've got the knowledge and skills to do a good job of it. We can all do a little bit of something. You know, as you know, I like to write and record songs. So I'm a little bit of a musician, but I'm not a professional musician. We've all got some musical thing we're interested in, but that doesn't mean we're real good at it. We just do it when we want to or enjoy it. So I think it's important for people to recognize that this is a specialized skill. There's always going to be a need for the role, regardless of the job title of people to whom it's assigned. And I get nervous when I see people who are maybe developers and very good at it. All of a sudden, they have to be performing this BA role without any training, without any reading, without any background. We're just supposed to somehow know how to do that. That's not a reasonable expectation. It's hard.
Yeah. No one knows the future, but yeah, the role is always there.
I think so.
Okay, thank you. And as we were talking, one more question has risen up. asking about your plans for the nearest
my
future.
future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm retired. I'm 68 years old. I've been doing this for quite a while, and I'm retired. But retired doesn't mean I'm dead. You know, I'm still doing other things. I do not plan to write any more technical books. I'll probably write some more articles. I have several ideas for articles that come to mind once in a while. One of the most fun things I ever did writing, several years ago, I wrote a novel. I just had this really, really cool idea. I wrote a forensic mystery novel, if you know what that is, about someone called a forensic sculptor. The book is called The Reconstruction, and it was just such a cool idea. I had to say, I wonder if I can write fiction. So I did. I wrote a 300-page book, and it was great fun. I have a few more ideas for novels, but I'm not planning to write any more technical books, and I'm not creating any new educational products or anything, but I do enjoy doing these kinds of sessions where I can share some of what I've learned with other people who will hopefully find it useful.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So we can expect to see more content from you this or another way, right?
Yes, and I do post articles. You mentioned my medium.com account. I do post articles out there from time to time, and I've got a lot of material that I've developed over the last many years, and it's great that people find it worth reading sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we are approaching, and I think we have slightly exceeded the end of our time slot. So I suggest that we just look at one last question that has been self-prioritized, and then I'm going to ask you to tell which one you think is the best, just according to any guidance you have.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just dropping a link to just PM'd you with a link to this Slido, I don't know how it pronounces board. So for easier review. And here is our, let me see, I think this is our last top prioritized question. System analysis.
So, yeah, business analyst in IT moving towards being a system analyst. You know, the definitions here is the problem we run into. And with requirements, I found that the very first problem we have when we start talking about anything related to requirements or business analysis is simply vocabulary. When you say requirement, what do you mean? When you say business requirement, sometimes people have different ideas of what that means. Same thing with an analyst. You know, there's a requirements analyst, business analyst, business system analyst. Somebody asked me about, well, what about a business process analyst? Well, I don't even know what she meant. I said, I'm not sure what you mean, but she never gave me an answer. So I still can't answer her question. But so the real problem here is, what do people mean when they say business analyst versus system analyst? I did have a client once that had split those two roles. And so their requirements process, something that we would in most cases think of a BA handling, they actually had two people. One was on the IT side in the IT community, the user community, and that was the business analyst. Then they had a system analyst in the technical community. But that just changes the communication. That just means that the BA and the SA now have to work together to exchange information clearly. So I don't know that it's moving toward being a system analyst. As I said, I don't really try to predict these kinds of things. But certainly the BA has to have a foot in each camp. They have to have a solid understanding of the user community and their terminology, and they have to have enough understanding of the technical community to bridge that. People have discussed for a long time, well, is it better for a BA to come out of the user side or out of the technical side? And I think it doesn't matter, because there's always going to be gaps in your knowledge, no matter where you come from. And so you need to learn whatever you need to know to be able to bridge that gap. And so we just have to recognize, what is our personal skill set today? What skill set do I need? What do I need to learn to be able to do a good job in that all-important bridging function?
Understood. Thank you very much, Karl. Yeah, that's this terminology is an issue, and we are one of the roles that can actually assist everyone involved with getting it resolved, I guess.
I think I have picked out my favorite question. If
Oh,
you'd like to
so
know.
what was that? Absolutely.
Could you scroll down a little bit, please?
Yeah.
I want to get to the one about the bridging.
Let me. I think I know what
Yeah,
you
there
mean.
it is.
This one?
Yeah, BA is a bridge between biz and development. I think that's probably the best question here, because that to me is the capturing the central role of the business analyst, which is to glue together these different communities and to communicate effectively across all of them. So of these many very good questions, of which I think I've probably only seen some of them, that I think is probably my favorite.
Excellent, excellent. It's a question from Yuri Goman from Ukraine, our neighbor, and he's been creating an excellent business analysis digest, I think, quite regularly, almost
Great.
every month, that we are enjoying. So it's
excellent.
It's a good friend of our community. So Yuri, congrats. And what it means, the fact that Karl has selected this question means that Yuri will get this book, Software Development Pearls, signed by Karl Wiegers. So congrats once again. And we'll discuss the logistics offline after the event. And as I said, we're already beyond the time slot, but it's been worth it. And also, like I said, Karl, what you have been doing has among all been a reason, one of the reasons for why this community exists, the community of people who are passionate about business analysis. And this community helps us become better at what we are doing. And thank you again for this impact. And I'd just like to remind everyone that today this community celebrates its 12th birthday. So it's an exciting long-term result, I would say.
Happy birthday, everybody.
Yeah, happy birthday, friends. And the last thing I'd like to mention, so Karl, although you haven't met most or any of them, you have more friends here in Belarus and around than you can possibly imagine.
That's great.
So yeah, thank you very much for finding the time to visit us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate the time you spent helping to put this together, Alex. And it's nice to see the faces of a bunch of the people who many of whom I'm sure I've communicated with through LinkedIn or something. And I'm always happy to have the connections, and great to see you all. So I wish you all luck, and I'm sure you'll have many more birthdays, and I'm very glad that I've been able to help contribute to your success.
Yeah, it's been incredible. Thanks again. All right, so I think here is where we are going to switch to Russian. So
I will stop then, because I don't know a word of Russian.
Yeah, thanks, Karl.
Well, so enjoy the rest of your session.
Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day too.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.